Well, let's take you to the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, where US President Joe Biden has arrived. It's his first visit to Ukraine since Russia invaded now almost a year ago. Now, you're watching pictures from the Ukrainian capital. There are some, this was just moments ago, and I'm not sure if you can see, but in the very back of the frame there are two men walking. One of them is Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, in his military fatigues, his traditional military fatigues, and the gentleman in the black suit next to him, that is US President Joe Biden. This was a surprise visit that we're only hearing about now. He was due to go to Warsaw. Let's speak to Alan Fisher. He joins us live now from the Polish capital. Alan, I believe President Biden was due there today and still is, but it seems he has made a bit of a surprise detour now.
There was always the suggestion that he could go to Kyiv. Certainly the White House was not confirming anything at the end of last week. What we do know is that at 4:15 on Sunday morning, he boarded a flight coming in this direction. Everything was kind of kept very quiet. He got a train into Kyiv. Now, if he followed the example of Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, and Lloyd Austin, the Defence Secretary, when they travelled to Kyiv last year, they went by train. The carriage was taken over by them and the windows were blanked out. Joe Biden has been keen to go to Kyiv. When he was here in Poland exactly a year ago, he wanted to make the journey, but at the last minute, the Secret Service advised that it wasn't safe. They couldn't make sure that he would be protected fully, and so it was cancelled. And then his wife went to Ukraine on Mother's Day in May last year. So Joe Biden was always keen to go there. And just in the last few minutes, we've had a statement from the White House confirming that the president is actually in Kyiv. He has met Volodymyr Zelensky. He's also announced an additional $500 million worth of military aid to Ukraine. No new weapons in that latest batch, but what he's saying is they will provide money for ammunition, for artillery, Javelin anti-tank missiles, and also howitzers, which have been so successful in helping to push the Russians back in many parts of Ukraine. The president also said that he will be announcing additional sanctions in the coming days. He's due to meet with the Polish president here on Tuesday. He was due to leave Washington tonight, in the next few hours, in fact, but obviously here in the region already. And then on Wednesday, he will meet members of NATO who represent the 9 countries of the eastern flank of NATO here in Warsaw as well. The intention always was that on Tuesday here in Warsaw, he would make a significant speech to mark the 1-year anniversary of the war. He, of course, has said that the United States has played a leading part in helping Ukraine protect their democracy. And in Ukraine, in the last few minutes, he has said that the US is there to stay and has no intentions of leaving Ukraine or leaving the Ukrainian people. Those comments coming, of course, as we're seeing a number of voices in the Republican Party, by no means the majority, the Republican Party in the United States, saying that they are concerned about the amount of money that is being funneled to Ukraine to help in their battle against Moscow. But Joe Biden making it absolutely clear it is not his intention, America's intention, to walk away from the commitment that they've given to Ukraine and the Ukrainian people.
Indeed, a very busy trip there for Joe Biden. Alan Fisher on the ground for us in the Polish capital, Warsaw. We'll leave it there for now. Thank you very much, Alan. We can now go to Hoda Abdulhamid. She joins us live from the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. Hoda, the optics here must be exactly what the Ukrainians have been hoping for.
Well, certainly, I think many Ukrainians are quite surprised by this unannounced visit. I have to say that we were actually out and about filming. We did hear the air sirens blare throughout the city, and actually we're still on the alert as we speak now. And then we noticed that something was up because the street was empty and there were sort of policemen posted. We saw a small motorcade. We didn't make much of it. We thought there was a high-level visit somehow, but we did not think it would have been the US President Joe Biden. Now, he has been spotted not very far away from here at the Michailowska Cathedral, walking with President Zelensky. I think many Ukrainians will be very happy to know about this as the news spreads. There is a bit of anxiety in the air as we approach march the one-year anniversary of the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. People were also apprehensive because the Russian President Vladimir Putin is supposed to give a speech on Tuesday. Backtrack to last year on the 22nd of November, Vladimir Putin gave a speech, and 2 days later there was a full-scale invasion. People here worried that something could be up, that the Russians could be trying to do something to mark their way this one-year anniversary. So certainly having the U.S. president here in the capital showing support, pledging more military aid, pledging more military package, and also sanctions is something that is going to be very welcomed among Ukrainian, not only President Zelensky.
Hoda Abdulhamid there, live for us in the Ukrainian capital. Thank you so much, Hoda. Well, meanwhile, EU foreign ministers are currently meeting in Brussels to discuss the war in Ukraine. This also comes a day after the United States warned China not to give weapons to Russia. Well, for more on all of this, let's speak to our diplomatic editor, James Bays. He's in Brussels for us. James, obviously, this trip that Biden has decided to take is happening right as the EU ministers are meeting. It's really quite the symbolic moment.
A very, very important moment. Yes, the ministers are actually inside the building. The foreign ministers of the European Union, the Moldovan foreign minister is about to join them. He's not a member of the EU. He's currently talking to reporters. They clearly are not seeing the pictures that we're seeing of President Biden on the streets with President Zelensky. 1 year on, or very nearly 1 year on into the war, I think this shows a picture of defiance by the Ukrainian president. Remember, back at the beginning of the war, when the Russians invaded almost a year ago, many thought that Kyiv was going to fall. Many thought that President Zelensky would end up in a Russian jail or killed. That is how seriously people felt that that things were going to go in Russia's direction and the might of the Russian army would prevail. Well, clearly that's not the way it's worked, and you've got now the US president showing his solidarity almost 1 year on, and lots of debate here going on about how the US and the rest of the Western alliance can continue to support Ukraine 1 year on. We hear that one of the problems, and I'm sure this is something that President Zelensky is going to be mentioning to President Biden as they speak there in Kyiv, is the problem of rearmament. Yes, Ukraine wants all sorts of other things in addition to now tanks it's getting from the West, including fighter jets. But the more imminent problem is that artillery that is holding back the Russians, the artillery shells are being used by the Ukrainians faster than they can be made in the factories. And so there is a real problem there. And we're hearing that there's going to be quite an urgent meeting taking place here in Brussels at NATO headquarters in the next 24 hours with the Ukrainian foreign minister, with the NATO Secretary General, with the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs, to try and bang heads together and get more armaments, get more weapons to the front lines, particularly in eastern Ukraine.
James, you were just in Munich at the security conference there, and we were hearing from leaders that they do expect this war to continue, potentially quite long term. Do you get the sense that that's also on the table there, that they're making preparations amongst EU foreign ministers for that to be the case?
Yeah, the word is it's going to be a long war and we need to give Ukraine whatever it wants. But of course, there is a caveat to that. Ukraine keeps asking for things and the EU and NATO leaders discuss it. And in most cases, we've seen it slowly ramped up, the aid, and now tanks are going to Ukraine. But it always takes a fair bit of delay and a fair bit of discussion, both around the NATO table and here at the European Union. But for now, I think, yes, the support is there. But I think it's worth bearing in mind that you're seeing now President Zelensky, you're seeing President Biden, both there for this very important trip, very symbolic trip to Kyiv. But remember the US election timetable, because President Biden has got now just a couple of years left in office. And we've got a presidential election coming up in the United States. And that might see a return of President Donald Trump or a Trumpian-type president. Now, would they want to continue the current policy towards Ukraine? Already, now that the Republicans have the control of the House of Representatives, we're hearing words from Republicans like no more blank checks for Ukraine. So I think while the Europeans say they're determined and they say this is absolutely key for the future of European diplomacy, and many of the states that are right next to Russia, the border Russia, feel that they, you know, if this war isn't won by Ukraine, then potentially they could be next. But of course, there's the US component and the US political component, and as you're aware, there is quite an isolationist element within the US political system.
James Baysday, our diplomatic editor at that EU foreign ministers meeting for us in Brussels. Thank you very much, James.